what 2025 looks like. There's certain dynamics that he mentioned before. Now the election is over.
People going out there and buying homes. And it's because now they understand like directionally what's going to happen. They might not know everything, but they at least know who the president's going to be and and where we're going as a country. If I'm a buyer today, one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, all right, like what inventory is going to come on the market? It's a very safe bet to say real estate prices are going to rise for years to come, just strictly based on generational reasons.
All right, we are back with New Jersey Living, the podcast. I have one of my feature guests here, Michael Pennisi, my broker with Coldwell Banker. Mike, thanks for joining us once again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So this podcast, we are going to dive into a little bit of a year in review for 2024, but we are going to really try to break out that crystal ball and take a look at 2025, what we can kind of predict, forecast, a lot of stuff we really don't know, but we can just look at trends, we can look at data, and we can come up with some ideas as to how this road appears to be kind of playing out, falling out in front of us for the near future. So this is something that you don't want to miss. Stick around. We're going to dive in now. Welcome to New Jersey Living, the podcast, where we explore all things New Jersey real estate. I'm your host, Corey Jones, a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker and team leader of the New Jersey Living Group. We're a team of experienced agents who specialize in residential sales in several counties ranging from Bergen County in northern New Jersey to Ocean County down the shore. On this podcast, we will talk to real estate experts, local business owners, community leaders, and town officials to get the inside scoop on various towns in New Jersey. We'll discuss everything from the latest market trends to featured local attractions with dining, recreation, and entertainment. Whether you're a current resident, a prospective buyer, or just curious about New Jersey real estate, we have something for you. So sit back, relax, and join us for a conversation about all things New Jersey Living. All right, welcome to New Jersey Living, the podcast. I'm Corey Jones, licensed real estate agent with Coldwell Banker and team leader of the New Jersey Living Group. We are operating obviously here in New Jersey, so definitely if you are interested in learning all things New Jersey, click like, subscribe, notification bell. We have some great information for both buyers and sellers. I'm going to flash up really quickly. Those who are watching, we've got a couple QR codes. So for those who are interested in just learning about New Jersey, because Mike, we got a good number of viewers that are from outside the region.
Yeah.
And they tune in. We have a relocation guide, and we have another QR code for those who are considering the buy process. And those definitely you want to tune into this episode because we are going to touch just on that. Is it now the time to buy? Is it time to wait? We're going to answer that question in this episode. Sellers, definitely don't leave you out. We have a QR code for you if you're just curious about your market value. Maybe you're not selling right now because I got to get my share of people who watch. They're not looking to sell, but they're interested in knowing what's going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, of course.
So get an analysis of your property. It's a major investment for you. Know the value. We have a QR code for you. You can get a quick, probably within 24 hours, I can get back to you with the value of your property. And if you're looking at cash offer, I have investors who will tie in and provide you with a rough cash offer estimate based on a few details about your home. So this is really quick and easy for anybody who's looking online. Those who are listening, you can dial right into the descriptions here and find some links for yourself as well. All right, so Mike, thanks for coming back with us. We are going to take a look at 2024 really quickly before we jump off. I can tell you, I mean, I'm not one to pat myself on the back at all, but it's been a great year for me, but I know at the same time it's been a challenging year in the business. So give us just a little, our listening audience and our viewing audience, what was real estate like in 2024 for the New Jersey market?
You know, I appreciate the fact that you said it was a great year for you because the God's honest truth is I think most real estate agents and brokers would argue that point. So kudos to you and your team. You guys are doing an amazing job. I think that the reality and the obvious starting point for this year is we have had the lowest amount of units sold, homes sold is another way of saying it, across the country in the last 30 years in 2024.
Wow.
And I think that, that's one way to look at the market. I think that that's the most obvious place to start. But it doesn't tell the whole story because if you look at units sold this year, it was lower than even at the lowest point in the market of 2008. However, the difference, I think it was like 23,000 or 25,000 less units than in 28. but it might even been more than that. I don't remember the year-end numbers. But the interesting thing is it doesn't feel like that market. And the reason why is because even though units are significantly less, the average sales price is significantly higher.
Right.
So it really, what we lost in unit count, we made up for in volume. Maybe not like for like, but the reality is that's certainly helped the marketplace.
Right.
From a seller perspective, it was a great thing. From a buyer perspective, what made this market very challenging is the lack of inventory.
Yes.
And we also saw, if you think about it, you have a lack of inventory coupled with skyrocketing interest rates this year. And, fortunately, they've started to come down, and I think that we're going to see further drops. But early in this year, we were dealing with the combination of sky high pricing, no inventory. So clearly there's more competition and interest rates to boot, So it really was like a perfect storm to, diminish the market.
Absolutely. And now we're in the fourth quarter. I had an episode that I did a little bit of a third quarter review back in maybe October. And from what we could see there, trend lines were showing that as we got into late summer, which is not unusual.
Yeah.
We get into late summer, you see volumes start to tick down a little. Right?
Well, I'll give you one more curveball this year.
Yeah, go ahead.
We did have a national election.
Oh, that's true.
I'm not sure if you remember that, but
that is true, man.
Yeah, yes. I mean, so that definitely is a monumental curveball every 4 years. And I think that, your viewers should realize that every 4 years, regardless of who wins or loses, the reality is prior to the election, there's a lot of fear of unknown.
Yes.
And once the election, occurs, and we're seeing this right now, so this is like present day. If you go out right now and you look at what's going on in the marketplace, we've seen an uptick in the last few weeks of, people going out there and buying homes. And it's because now they understand like directionally what's going to happen. They might not know everything, but they at least know who the president's going to be and and where we're going as a country. And I think that sense of people fear the unknown. Once they have some clarity, they start making business decisions,
right?
Or personal decisions, however you want to view it. And we're starting to see that right now. And I believe that we will, throughout the rest of this year and obviously into early next year.
And so that gives us our pivot point, kind of like what 2024 has looked like. And now as we pivot into 2025, you already spoke about interest rates a little, because the expectation is that now we will see a settling and a trending downward. How far and how fast, I really don't know. But I know that sweet spot tends to, what I hear most often is that 5.5 is a sweet spot, right?
I think 5.5 is the point where if it hits 5.5, which I do believe it will, I just don't know how quickly.
Yeah.
I don't think like the days of like 3%, 2%, that's not happening.
Right.
I mean, we'll probably never see that again in our lifetime. But 5.5 is an achievable, goal, so to speak, for the Fed. And I do believe that will happen. I'd like to see it happen in the next year. And if it does happen in the next year, I think that, for the buyers that are watching this right now, I know it sounds like a great thing for you to, hear interest rates are dropping. And it is like, certainly helps you from a monthly perspective in terms of what your costs will be and all that. But I'd also caution you to realize that once that happens, there's an army right now of people sitting on the sidelines waiting for that to happen in order to jump back in the market. And if you look at like demographics of, millennials, which are, they're very much in their home buying prime right now. Many of them have cash. They're sitting on the sidelines just waiting to make a decision based on rates. You're going to see a sea of buyers enter the marketplace at that point in time. So I would highly recommend that if you're a buyer that's like on the fence right now, you really make a push to start thinking about buying now before that happens. Because if that does occur, which I believe it will, I think that the amount of demand is going to completely outweigh the amount of supply, which is obviously, simple supply and demand that leads to prices going up.
Yes.
It also leads to a lack of opportunity for buyers. Because naturally, like, you go to buy a house, there's 30, 40, 50 offers on a property. It's really tough to get a house.
Yes.
We're actually not seeing that right now.
Right.
Today it's a unique marketplace in that we're seeing, call it 5 to 10 offers on most homes, like depending on the price point and where you are. But it's still a marketplace where a motivated buyer could get a home.
Very competitive still. That's what I've been telling a lot of buy-side clients is that, there may be only 3 to 5 offers. Again, depending on the area.
Depends on the marketplace.
But, say if we have 3 to 5, best believe that there's going to be a very strong offer among that number.
Yeah, listen, from a seller's perspective, like we're still breaking records in terms of price. So sellers are, can't watch this and think to themselves, oh, I might as well wait for the market to get better. And I'll tell you why. Like when you see interest rates drop, you're also going to see better inventory come on the market.
Yes.
And the reason why is like most of the inventory that's kind of gridlocked right now, what it is there are people that have such low interest rates that like if you have an interest rate in the 3% range and you're going from 3% to 7%, that's really a hard pill to swallow.
It is, yeah.
If you're a move up buyer, move down buyer, retiree. But if you're somebody that you're in the 3s and it's now in the 5s, like that's not as difficult. Now you're going to make your move.
Yeah, you can swallow that pill a little easier than seeing a 6 or a 7.
I tend to think that the market's gonna be more difficult for buyers and sellers, like if interest rates were to drop significantly. And I know that's it's kind of an anomaly, but it's true. I just think that it's gonna be more competitive for for buyers rather. And I think that there's gonna be some more competition. Whereas right now, if you're a seller and you have a conditional issue of any sort, you'll still sell and you have no issue.
Right.
But if you have better inventory coming to market, like naturally that, it's going to highlight your conditional issue. So, let's just say you have a, double yellow line, street, or if you have a, train in the backyard or functional obsolescence or any of the things that, that happen with homes, like buyers are overlooking that right now. If you get more inventory, I think it becomes more highlighted.
Yes. No doubt about it. That buyer's going to be a bit more selective, right? If those options are presented. There's no question about it. And we were talking a little bit, Mike and I, just before we started recording here, and what 2025 looks like. There's certain dynamics that he mentioned before. Now the election is over, without us giving endorsements on either side. But the realities is that there are going to be some changes as we enter into 2025. So what that looks like in reality is that we are likely to see some drops in prices just in terms of fuel costs, for example, right? So some of these things can make a difference inflation-wise and with trade, and how does that translate to housing? That's the real question for your consumer. How does this make a difference for what I look at in the market?
Yeah, when you look at inflation, there's actually you could go online and you could look this up, but they break down inflation into different, percentages based off of industry percentages. So some of it's the cost of goods. You go to the grocery store, what is it, a banana cost? What is it, a gallon of milk? A big portion of inflation is housing. And we touched upon this a little bit, earlier, but I should say, prior to the show, but the reality is what we're seeing in housing are the trend lines have actually changed significantly in terms of new construction. And with new construction, it used to be where builders were out there building, single family homes and, and that was kind of the bread and butter for a long time. That trend has shifted, not entirely, but the majority of it is shifted to multifamily for the last several years.
Right.
It's dissipated a little bit in 2024, if I'm being real about it, but you got to remember there's a lag time to construction. So what happened in 2023 is the inventory that comes on in 2024.
Okay.
And naturally we're still seeing that big push towards multifamily. One of the things that I found to be really just an amazing stat is that 97% of the multifamily that's being built right now across the country is being built for rentals, and specifically for luxury rentals. So, and the majority. I was
curious if that number was Jersey. I remember you had mentioned the 97.
It's 97. That's nationally, national. But it's okay. Listen, you could drive around New Jersey.
Jersey,
and you
absolutely.
Could say the exact same thing.
Yes.
I bet you it holds for New Jersey because we're seeing very little. You're seeing single family construction, $2-3 million homes. But the reality is the majority of homes, with the exception of flips, but with the majority of homes that of projects that are being built new construction in New Jersey, almost all of them are multifamily rentals, luxury rentals in every market you can imagine. And listen, I mean, what that does is like that's driving up the cost of rental prices across the country, because if you could get a condo, or it's not really even a condo, in many cases it's an apartment. If you could get an apartment, you know, and they're charging you thousands of dollars, like an alternative to an apartment, a single family home with the privacy of a single family home, and everything else naturally gets pushed higher. So we're seeing rental prices rise, which is certainly not a good thing for buyers. I mean, you know, for buyers that are first-time home buyers that are waiting it out, so to speak.
Yes.
You know, all you're going to see is your price points just go up, you know, further and further. We saw excuse me, that's almost incorrectly stated. We saw, as a percentage, we saw a decrease, or a deacceleration, I should say, of the rise in rental prices this year.
Right.
But it's misleading because they're still going up. So like, you know, instead of going up by 14%, they're going up by 4%. Like they're still rising. And, you know, I think that that's something that it's not really encouraging for, you know, people that are renting, but the truth is it's probably good reason why you should buy. You know, just knowing that your costs are increasing regardless, you might as well do it where you're, you know, you have, you know, equity build up while you're paying it, and you're able to write off your interest.
And to that point, this is a data point, and I did not look that up for this particular episode for fourth quarter, but when I did my analysis of third quarter, the percentage of above ask sell price, right, actually trended down a little, right? And this was coming off of part of it was seasonal as well, though.
Yeah,
it wasn't a high time, right? When we look at March, April, May, June, I mean, you're going to expect to see differences, right?
I'll be honest with you. I take some of those stats with a grain of salt.
Okay.
Like, and I'm not discrediting it, because you're probably, I'm sure you're correct. But sometimes there's a mix of business from year to year, or from quarter to quarter. Mix of business refers to, like, you could have, you know, 5 houses that are completely redone, turnkey, come on this quarter in a particular marketplace, and the next quarter, for whatever reason, you just have 5 houses that like need some work. Okay. And like naturally the turnkey is going to sell at a premium and everything else. So you got to take some of that with a grain of salt. It becomes more clear when you're looking at the macro, and you're looking at like a whole marketplace over the course of a year, you know, year to year stats. And, you know, even so, you could see a drop off of, there's less homes selling above ask in, you know, today than there was a year ago.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, sometimes I kind of laugh about it, because when you're going from, you know, 85% of homes that are selling above asking price to 84% of homes selling, you know, above asking price, yeah, there was a drop off, but like, you know, if you look, you know, relative to the rest of history, like, you know, when it's usually a third of the homes that are selling above asking price, it's kind of, you know, it's negligible.
And that's, and to that point, what I looked at was data points that showed, let's say the typical range, and I can't remember which market I looked at, whether it was Essex County or whether it was Bergen. I can't remember which county. I think it probably was Essex. But your typical range was 4 to 7% above, right? In that quarter, whereas the previous quarter, it maybe had been like more like 8 to 10. Right?
So I can speak to that too, actually. Something that needs to be accounted for when you look at those numbers, and it's, again, you know, statistics, like you almost have to use them in conjunction with other stats for it to make sense sometimes. What's interesting is there's been some price exhaustion, because you have, like, I'll give you the example of what that looks like is you have, you know, a seller, 123 Main Street, you know, puts their house on the market for $400,000, and let's just say it sells for $500,000.
Okay.
Well, you know, when 125 Main Street, you know, the next door neighbor decides to come on the market, they see that one sold for 500. Now they want to price it at 500.
Yes.
And like, you know, eventually as that escalates, like you get to a point where you could still get, in some cases, you could still get top dollar, like the best sales price that has been in that marketplace, but you started at a higher number, so it doesn't look like it's accelerating as high.
Correct.
And we've definitely seen that for the last several years. But like I said before, I think that we're in this like nice little niche market, you know, where, and I think it's a temporary thing where buyers can get a home. And, you know, and I think that if I'm a buyer today, one of the things that I'm thinking about is like, all right, like what inventory is going to come on the market in the, you know, in just call it the near future, like, you know, the next couple of years. What is something going to save the market and bring prices down and all that other stuff?
Right.
Unfortunately, I don't see that coming. And I'll tell you why. Like we're you know, I spoke about new construction. There's no affordability for builders to, it's not even affordability. It's a mixture of things. It's affordability in terms of buying land, you know, which certainly there's no affordable land right now, not in New Jersey, especially. Yeah. There's affordability for the materials and the price of goods and services. Think of like lumber and stuff like that. I do think that will come down a little bit as like gas prices, you know, if we open up pipelines in the US and like all of that naturally is going to play a role in terms of like bring down the cost of transportation. So that will be impacted. But another challenge they're having is actually labor. Like that's a big challenge right now is finding, you know, cheap labor for construction. You need cheap labor in most instances. And that's something that's problematic right now. Also zoning, like, you know, in New Jersey specifically, like, you know, we're not in the middle of Montana or Wyoming or like where we have like widespread out lands where you could do more, you know, in terms of property rights. Like if you do something on your property, you have a neighbor next to you that like is going to be vocal about it. And, you know, the municipalities in New Jersey have a lot of, you know, zoning and permit regulation. And so that slows down the process. It makes it more expensive. So you're really not seeing it on the new construction side. We have a negligible amount of distressed properties. You know, people that are going into foreclosure, that are short sales. In fact, we have the highest, it's a historic high the last 2 years of the amount of equity that people have in their homes.
Yes.
I mean, just to give you a glimpse of this, which is just a mind-boggling stat. Like if you look at from 2020 to today, home prices are up 47%.
I remember.
And it's even worse in New Jersey. So if you think about that,
that's a national number then.
It's a national number, but in New Jersey, it's even worse. It's, you know, it's obviously a marketplace that grows faster when times are good. So if you were a buyer in 2020 and you were thinking, oh, the market's too crazy, I'm going to wait it out. Like if you were buying a $400,000 house, that $400,000 house is like close to $800,000 right now.
Yes.
And I mean, and that if, you know, I know it's a crazy thought, but like if you look at, and this is some national stats, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit, but I'm not that far off. Like I think the Fed came out with a study and said, you know, what is the average amount of cash savings that, you know, the average American has across the country? And it was something like $9,000.
Okay.
Like it was a very like, you know, nominal number. It wasn't like an extreme number of, you know, the spendable income, so to speak. So that $9,000, you think about it, like you're talking about a $400,000 growth in a 4 or 5 year stretch, like just for owning a home. Like if you're a buyer waiting on the sidelines, why?
Yeah.
Like, you know, that is where your wealth will be created.
Correct.
There's no question about it.
And I have
that is the American dream. Like, you know,
no doubt.
There's no question.
And that whole piece of it being your home is where you lay your head, of course, but it's investment, right?
Yeah, it's the combination.
The conversation I've had with some buyers who have had that mindset, and sometimes it's just exhaustion. Yeah. It's just being in bidding process after bidding process. But the reality is you can see a difference in Jersey specifically. I know you can see a difference in 3 to 6 months of some of the people I work with, right? Because I know the same property. If we were December 23, I know by the time we hit April, this price point is not going to get you the same home.
We had homes that we brought on the market for one price, didn't sell for whatever reason. 3 months later, had multiple offers.
Yes,
and it's like, I mean, it's crazy, but it's the truth. Like it just depends on the marketplace at a given time.
And some rationale goes back to interest rates because we've seen rates in 7 all the way down to just right around 6. They bounced up again recently, but they're starting to settle again. And what I often say is to clients that are very concerned about interest rates is that they're not married to that rate, right? So if they have some time, if they have the ability to get into a home, we will see a reduction at some point in time, and they can consider refi at some point. But I think that's a major barrier. People are very rate conscious, and part of their rationale in waiting is to say, well, I'd rather get active when that rate is lower. But to your point, we get to that place where we're comfortably in the fives, even if it's 5.9, 5.8.
Yeah.
I see a lot of uptick in activity at that point. The competition is going to increase at that point.
Yeah, there's no question. I think that the way I view the market always is you have interest rates on one side, you have price on the other, and they come together to give you your monthly cost.
Yeah.
Like, well, really if you're trying to predict the market, and this is just like approaching this from like an educated guess perspective, because you don't have a crystal ball, I don't have a crystal ball. Like we don't really know exactly what's going to happen, nor do any of your viewers.
Right.
But if you approach this from just like a logical perspective, rates are going to go up, they're going to go down, they're going to go up, they're going to go down. Like that happens over time for macro reasons. There's a lot of variables that go into that.
Right.
I think that the likelihood of rates dropping over the course of the next year is very likely. I don't think that they're going to drop to extreme numbers, but I think that we're going to see, a settling, call it between 5 and 6%. Like, so we'll just put that as a placeholder. And, I think that that's a fair, expectation.
Right.
On the other side is price. And I think that when you look at price, you can't help but look at supply and demand. And when I look at supply and demand, I think of really, there's a scarcity of land in New Jersey. Like there's only so much land, you can't produce more of it. Populations have increased. Like, that's something that's been playing a role, and populations have increased for a number of reasons. And when I say populations, maybe not the total population, but the home buying population.
Yeah, and speak to that a little bit more, because we talked about the numbers of the boomers compared to millennial, right? So speak to that a little bit.
If you think about it, millennials, I think they own something like 37% of all homes across the U.S. It's a large population of people, and they
the millennial or the boomer?
I'm sorry, the baby boomers.
Boomer, okay.
Yeah, I misspoke.
Got it.
So baby boomers own the majority, the highest percentage out of any group of generation is the baby boomers. Listen, some of them are going to sell their homes. Some of them are never going to sell their homes. But the reality is mortality is going to make those homes change hands at some point.
Yes.
Like that's just inevitable. We all, have a life cycle here. And so what happens is like now who's buying that inventory? And the reality is you have like, Gen X, millennials and Gen Z. They're very large populations of people. Millennials specifically are a larger population than baby boomers.
Right.
They're in their home buying prime right now. Like, and Gen Z is not far behind. Now, what has happened is what we've seen the first time home buyer age has crept up. Like it was like 36, 35 years old, right in that range, whereas years before it was 32, 33, like on average. Yeah. So naturally we're seeing an older population of people as a first time home buyer, which what it does is like, 10 years behind that, they become the move up buyer. Like, 5 to 10 years. Usually it's closer to 10 these days on average.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing now is like, okay, you have this whole population of people, of baby boomers, that most of them are holding on to their homes longer than any other population of people because they're wealthy. They can afford to stay in place. It's a very, very wealthy and affluent generation.
Yes.
They're passing that wealth on to, in many cases, their millennial children, like, depending on where they are in the baby boomer population.
Right.
And what's happening is like millennials are such a large population of people that if you think of this in just pure supply and demand perspective, you have all of this supply that's coming to market at some point, but then you have a larger group of demand, like, a larger generation of demand. So what happens when there's less supply and more demand? Prices rise. And I think that it's a very safe bet to say real estate prices are going to rise for years to come, just strictly based on generational reasons. Now you throw in, the lack of new construction, like the fact that new construction that is being built for luxury rentals. So it's not adding to the overall supply. You factor in the fact that we've had record high immigration, like breaking every record for years immigration, the last several years, which brings in a population of people that need housing.
Right.
Like you have this, and you have no distressed properties coming to market because pretty much everybody has more equity than they ever have in the history of this country, and specifically in New Jersey, that's true.
Yes.
So they could sell their home before they would get foreclosed on.
Right.
So where's the inventory coming from? It's not. And what that means is it's going to put pressure on price. So when you're looking at that, going back to the equation that you spoke of pricing and interest rates, I personally would say, hey, buy today, lock in today's prices. If you're a buyer, like even if the interest rates are a little higher, and then as interest rates fall, you drop, but at least you've locked in for your ever price today at a better price point.
Correct. Because I would say comfortably, you're looking 10% from year to year. I'm talking Jersey, right?
Yeah, so, I mean, in our markets, it was 14% year over year, which is crazy,
isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy.
14%. So if you are a buyer, been considering, when do I make that move? Do I make that move? Do I wait? Because a lot of attention is on correction or crash, like which is coming, right? Yeah. And I can't speak for every market in the country, but I can speak for where we are, right? So correction and crash is just not in the forecast for New Jersey for all these reasons.
I couldn't imagine that we're going to see that. I mean, the only way that, I mean, listen, if we had like another pandemic, or if we had, you know, God forbid, like World War III, or like, you know, there could be like some crazy X factor that happens.
Right.
But short of that, I have no, like, there's nothing predictable that you could look at for like the regular metrics to say, oh, this is going to be a market that fails. Yeah. I mean, it's not, listen, I've worked in, you know, that 2008 and 2007 when the market crashed, and, you know, it was not a fun time. But what I will tell you is there were predictable things that you could say, like, you know, look at, you know, how much people were borrowing versus, you know, what the homes were worth. Like, you know, there were certain things that, you know, they were giving money to people that probably shouldn't have been receiving money. Like, we don't have that issue right now.
Oh, no, that's over. You know, those days are done.
People, you know, they're not only are they well qualified, but in many cases, like they're affluent. Like, you know, you know, a lot of the buyers in the marketplace today. I mean, you know, as well as I do, like, you know, when you do a multiple offer, almost guaranteed 20% of them are bringing in cash.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if not 40% in certain markets.
Yes.
And so it doesn't mean that they're always, you know, the cash buyers don't always win, but, you know, it certainly changes the dynamic when you have that many people are coming in with cash.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, look, on the buy side, this is something to really give some thought and consideration to. And even for our sellers. I mean, as sellers, obviously you're in a strong position because you are limited in terms of what options a lot of buyers have out there. But we were talking a little earlier, you know, for a seller standpoint, where interest rates do factor in, and we mentioned this a little earlier in the episode, actually, is that it's easier to stomach if you see a 5 in front of a number or not. That's what I am interested in seeing. What's that point where sellers who have been thinking about it, is about that time, they're retiring, they're really considering relocation, but they've been holding off because many people who refied back 4 years ago, right? They are anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5, somewhere in that range, right? So, but I really, in my gut, I do believe if the closer we get into a mid-5, I think that will be a trigger point for a lot of sellers to feel a lot more comfortable. Like, okay, you know what?
Well, there's a lot of people way smarter than I am that seem to think that 5.5 is like the number that everything goes nuts with.
Yeah.
You know, and we got a glimpse of this. I'm going to butcher the time period, but it was like 2 years ago. There was one particular month, it might have been November. I don't remember the month of the year, but we saw, you know, interest rates skyrocket. And then they dropped back down to 5.5 for 1 month, and we broke every record.
Oh, really?
Like, and then they skyrocketed back up. And you know, I gotta look it up off the top of my head. I can't remember what month it was, but you know, we got a glimpse of it, and it was just like every sales record you could imagine for a month, like, got broken nationally.
Oh wow!
So you know, we did get a little bit of a preview of what would happen. You know, there's another factor that's playing a role today that, you know, is worth mentioning. And that's, if you're a seller, it depends on who you are as a seller. Like, if you're a retiree, this doesn't apply to these people. But there's a lot of sellers today that if interest rates, let's just say they're moving up, if interest rates were to drop, I know that I've spoken to many people that fall into this category where if interest rates get to 5.5, they're going to buy their dream home, but they're going to keep their home that they live in now and rent it out. And I think that that's the other factor that needs to be stated in terms of a lack of inventory. Just because we see people moving up doesn't mean that inventory is coming to market.
Yeah.
And we're seeing more and more people understand the benefits tied to home ownership and to being a landlord.
Yes.
And also, there's a more affluent population of people that have the ability to do that. Yeah. And so the combination of those two things is kind of interesting because, don't just think that as soon as it drops that, all these people are selling homes. That may or may not be the case. They may actually be holding on to properties as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then have, again, you have many people who have paid that house off, right? Yeah. So there's nothing but taxes that they're paying on it anyway. Why not keep it and just go and
just realize that it could help pay for their move up.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Absolutely. 100%. So yeah, this is a lot of factors to take in. I know a lot of numbers and a lot of different bits of information have been coming, but this is something that if you're on the sideline right now as a buyer, you really want to get in gear now. If there's some insights you want to get on the New Jersey market, absolutely reach out. Again, I'll flash it one more time. My buyer's guide and my relocation guide. Reach out. Me and my team would be glad to help with any kind of insights and assistance that you may need. And on the sell side, again, if you have just been pondering what I may want to do come to 2025, reach out at the very least. Get an idea of what your market value, because that's something Mike can tell you changes from year to year, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does. We've seen, significant rises this past year, like we just said. And, I think the other thing that I'll give you credit on is you do a really nice job when sellers are contemplating making cost-effective changes to their home. You certainly have an eye for that, and being able to go out there and and just take a look and see if the project they're considering makes sense in terms of the marketplace. Mm-hmm. There's tremendous value in that, and I would encourage any seller who's like in that category, give Corey a call, because reach out. The reality is it in many cases it could save them thousands of dollars of unnecessary work that's not going to add to the bottom line.
Correct. 100%, right? And that bottom line is significant, right? This is very much a life investment you've had in owning that home, and you want to make the best you can with a sale. So we want to thank Mike again for joining us.
It's always a pleasure. I enjoy this, and thank you for the time.
Yes. So we'll look. We'll end up with Mike in the new year, sometime in kind of like January, February time frame, right, for our 2025 early edition. So in the meantime, those who, again, you need to get in touch with me. My contact number and info and even Calendly link is right here in the details. You can always book an appointment. And those who are, again, not viewing but listening, take a view of my YouTube channel, right? So I have far more YouTube content and episodes than I do podcasts at this point in time. Many of you are already seeing me on YouTube, so that's great. But if you're a listener, tune in, check into the YouTube channel just to get some additional information and insights there. So in the meantime, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and stay safe. Stay tuned to New Jersey Living.